I'm DeRoche. Welcome to From the Practice Studio. This series is available exclusively through StringsByMail. In today's episode, we're going to discuss timbre. Timbre is sound color or sound character. And I would like to show you the ways that I use to manipulate sound color or sound character on the instrument. There are three primary ways that I do this, which I'll show you, and I also have some accompanying exercises that you can find in the printed materials, which are available along with this video. So please join me as we dig into practicing timbre. Okay, first, let's discuss the technique of timbre and how to produce different timbres on the instrument. For me, there are three primary ways, and these ways that I use to change timbre are based on my understanding of the physics of how a string manipulates the movement of the top and how we manipulate the movement of the string. I got most of my information many years ago from a really great book called Tone Production on the Classical Guitar. This is by John Taylor, and this book is now unfortunately out of print, and so it may be quite difficult to find. There may be other articles also that present similar materials, but maybe you want to do an interlibrary loan or scour some used bookstores or something to try to find a copy. It's absolutely worthwhile. His description is much more precise and has much more depth than what I'll be able to show you here. But the good thing is that in this video you can actually see and hear me doing these things that I've learned somewhat from John Taylor's book. So we have that. Then also this book, the Mauro Giuliani 120 Studies for Right Hand. I'm going to use some exercises from this book today, but I also have printed those out in the printed materials. So this one, the Giuliani Studies, this is available through StringsByMail, so if you want to pick up a copy to have handy for arpeggios, you know where to get it. Okay, the technique itself. For me, there are three primary ways of manipulating timbre on the instruments, and I'm going to call them placement, angle, and tilt, or the shape of the object that's plucking the string. So there's three different ways. The placement along the string, and I'll show you really quickly what that means. The placement back here, for instance, we would think of this as a ponticello region, then a normal region here near the edge of the sound hole, and then tasto or dolce up by the fingerboard. So this is placement, that's the word I'm using. Placement along the string affects the sound. Then there's also the angle that we release the string from, and that has also to do with hand position, but the angle that you go across the string. So for instance, if I go across or through the string at a 45-degree angle like this, it tends to produce a warmer sound than if I were to go through at a 90-degree angle, which is more like this. You can probably hear a difference in the sound already, right? So brighter sound when you go across at a 90-degree angle, darker sound when you go across at a 45-degree angle. So that's the second one, the angles. First one was placement, second one, angle. The third one, the tilt of our hand or the shape of the object that's releasing the string, affects the sound also. And that can be understood by thinking about the fingertip. So when we look at our fingertip, many of us actually, we attack the string usually with the pad part of the finger first, and then release simultaneously from flesh and nail, just the very edge of the nail at the last moment departs the string. But it's the object that's pulling the string back and releasing it is a rounded object, a thicker, wider, more rounded object. Or if we release from the tip of the nail or just a sharpened object, that will produce a much brighter sound. So the more rounded the object is, the wider it is, the darker the sound, the more abrupt the departure from a pointed object or a sharp object produces a brighter sound. So those things need to be sorted out, and I'll show you each one in turn here. So first off, let's think about these three things. Placement, the angle, and the tilt, or the shape of the object going through the string. Those are the three things that we need to learn to manipulate to change timbre on the guitar. So I'll show you these in turn on the guitar here. Okay, this first one is placement. So this is a very traditional way of thinking about how we move up and down the string. When we pull the string back near the bridge, we use the word ponticello to describe that in most cases. Sometimes you'll see the word metallic or metallico or bright, and that's back here. Then there's a normal or ordinary sound, which is near the edge of the sound hole. Notice it's a little warmer. Then there's tasto, or sometimes dolce is used as the word to describe this sweeter, darker sound up here. So when we see these, we can tell that I'm plucking the string in a different place or placement along the string. And you can hear a pretty drastic sound color change. So that affects the chain or the string and how it vibrates the top. And so we can manipulate our sound. And most people think of 3 different regions. There's really an infinite number, but practically speaking, 1, 2, 3 spots are a good place to start anyway. So we have 3 different registers of sound for placement. Then let's move on to the angle that we go across the string next. String angle, or the release angle of the finger, has a lot to do with the overall quality of sound. Now, this modern way of playing, the way that I tend to play most of the time, is to pull through the string at about a 45-degree angle. So if it's easier to think about it just kind of lining my hand up like this. If I were to go straight across the guitar, this would be a 90-degree angle. Or if I go this way, I'm going at about a 45-degree angle. I'm slicing through the string, let's say. And so the angle that we go through the string greatly changes how it's released from the fingertip and the overall sound character, sound quality, or the timbre. So if I start out here with this 45-degree angle, you can hear the sound is full and warm, velvety even, and I like that. It's a nice sound to me. If I tilt my wrist this way, so I'm doing this, which we can think of as kind of the older Targa school, where the players described lining the fingers all up with the same string, the fingertips on one string, or the knuckles would be lined up with one string. That approach means we're going to be releasing the string from a 90-degree angle instead of a 45-degree angle. Now let's listen to the sound change. That's a 90-degree angle versus 45. So you can hear a tremendous change just in the angle. And it doesn't have to be 90 or 45. There's all the degrees in between that give us a little more of one or the other. So if you want it to be a little brighter, you can go a little more in this direction, a little darker, a little more in this direction. We can get to the point where we're going almost perpendicular with the string, where it takes most of the high partial sound out of the string and makes it extremely velvety, but also kind of muddy or woolly sometimes too. And it's also very practical to play like this. Okay, so that was the angle that we pull across the string. Let's take a look at the shape of the object that is releasing the string. Now, this is our fingertip or fingernail, or even a combination of the two. I'm not going to talk so much about the attack, how we approach the string, because that doesn't matter as much. Although it can affect the sound, we can have nail clicks and other things if we don't approach it properly. But what we're talking about mostly today is the release. So the shape of the object that releases the string, the wider it is and the more rounded it is, like a fingertip, the darker the sound will be. The more pointed an object is, or the sharper it is, or in other words, the more abruptly the string is released from a more singular point, the brighter the sound will be. And sometimes we can actually release it from a specific point that can excite an overtone that really doesn't line up well with the guitar and produces a kind of dissonance or a bad sounding tone. I'll try to demonstrate that for you. So the way that we do this though on the guitar involves this angle of tilt. So going from here to here, you can actually kind of experiment a little on your own, but if we go straight across this way, I'm at a 45-degree angle. I'm playing in this normal zone here. It produces a fairly warm sound. Now, if you look at the shape of my nail, it's basically a flat top with a subtle ramp going this way to push the string down. Then at this outer edge on the tip here, it's round, it's pointed, but it's not sharply pointed. It's rounded a bit on the very tip. So hopefully you can see that well enough. And so the final tip that releases the string for me is somewhat rounded to produce a more beautiful sound. If it's really sharp and pointy, it's more abrupt and it doesn't sound as good. So this tilt angle that we're talking about, you'll hear the sound difference in just a moment. So going across here with a flat top, but if I tilt a little this direction, what happens is now I'm catching this bottom corner of my nail. So I can get to the point where I'm really just releasing from that nail, and it's extremely bright. So that's the tilt angle, and that affects the sound. So basically what happens when I tilt my finger down like this, I'm playing with essentially a guitar pick. So it's almost the exact same shape if you think about it. My fingernail, I'll put this in the forefront a little bit here, and the finger and the guitar pick, they're almost the same shape here. So that's what happens when you play through. If you go through and you lead from a sharp point like this, it's like using a guitar pick. It produces a very bright sound. Okay, so that was the tilt angle. And now let's put all three together in a couple of exercises so you can really hear the changes of sound. Okay, next let's take a look at these 4 exercises that I have for you to try using timbre on. I'm going to do the first 3 are Giuliani exercises. Start with exercise number 1, then we'll do exercise number 2, then we'll skip way back to exercise 100, and then the 4th one is a G major scale. So anyway, the Giuliani exercises involve 2 chords, and if you're not familiar with them, I'll just tell you what they are. They are a C major chord in the left hand here, open position C major chord, C, E, and C on the 2nd string are the fretted notes. That's in the first measure. The second measure involves playing a G7 chord in first inversion. So the second finger plays B, 5th string, 2nd fret. The little finger plays D, 2nd string, 3rd fret. And the first finger plays F, 1st string, 1st fret. All right, that's a G7 chord in first inversion. Most of the time in these exercises, we don't use the lower G on the 6th string. We're just limiting it. So I don't hold that one down. So we just hold down these 3 pitches. Okay, so those are the chords used in this exercise. In exercise 1, it's this pattern here in the right hand. Thumb, index, middle. Thumb moves to the different bass strings in turn. So on beat 1, it plays on the 5th string. Beat 2, 4th string. Beat 3, 3rd string. And beat 4, back to the 5th string. Then you switch chords and do the same thing in the right hand. Switch between them. All right, you get the idea. So now, let's use these 3 different types of changes of timbre using this block chord exercise here, Giuliani number 1. Let's first start out with placement. So we'll start out doing a really bright sound first. Then let's switch to changing the angle. And I'm going to do that just in one spot for starters. So here it is, the 90-degree angle, the bright sound. Well, let me start with the normal sound, actually. Normal, or for me, normal, 45-degree angle. Then bright, which is this, 90-degree angle. Normal. Bright. Then you can put all these things together, so you can start doing all these different changes with each placement. So you can put the placement back by Ponticello here and 90 degrees and get an extremely bright sound. Not very pleasant. It's a fairly shocking effect that could be used, but that's one way of doing it. Then you can also then change the angle to normal angle, or 45-degree angle. 90. 45. So you can really hear these changes. They're pretty dramatic. All right, then let's add in some of this tilt angle, and it can produce yet another variance of timbre. So let's start out here in our normal position. And let's try this tilt. So I'm going to tilt down to get a little bit brighter sound. I'll start normal, and then I'll switch to a tilt in this direction. So I'm now going to be leaving from this finger tip, or the tip of the nail, rather, and it's going to give us a fairly bright sound. So let's listen to that. Tilt. And you don't have to go to one extreme or the other. You can go in between them, right? So now let's take this and apply this to the other different exercises in turn, and I'll use all these and kind of mix them together throughout these different exercises. Okay, now let's use 3 more exercises to help us to get used to this manipulation of timbre, or sound color, on our guitar. Exercise number 2 is an arpeggio pattern, using P-I-M arpeggio fingering in the right hand and the same 2 chords in the left hand, C and G7. All right, so let's just try that one with a normal sound for starters. And then I think I'm going to try something that gives me just a little bit clearer sound, a little thinner sound, but I don't want to go way back in here. I think I'm just going to switch to this angle a little bit more. So let's hear that difference. It's not radical, but it's a little different. You can hopefully hear that. All right, so you can do these different sound colors with arpeggios as well. Then let's try a different type of exercise. Let's try tremolo next. This is exercise number 100 in the Giuliani studies. And tremolo is using thumb as a bass note typically, followed by ring, middle, index, AMI, all playing on the same string after it. So thumb first, then ring, middle, index, in this case on the first string, okay? So here's exercise number 100, and I'll start out with a normal sound first to get going here. Now let's switch it up and get a little bit brighter sound this time. So I'm going to give a little tilt angle here, but maybe I want kind of a combination of a little bit brighter, a little bit more clarity, but maybe up here just a little bit more. So let's hear the difference in that. Darker. Radically bright. So you can hear these sound color changes, timbral changes, I think pretty clearly, or hopefully you can hear them clearly as I go through these. And I'm trying all these different things. I'm kind of combining changes of angle this way, going across, different placements, and some of this tilt angle a little bit as well. Lastly, let's apply it to a scale pattern, just so we can try it on a variety of different techniques. Actually, to me, this is what technique really is. It's applying expressive devices to all these different physical patterns. That's, I think, the best way to develop technique. So that's what we're doing in this series. Anyway, we're going to try this pattern here. I'm going to use this fingering for a G major scale. The fingering is 2-4 on the bottom string, on the notes G and A. Then 1-2-4 on the 5th string. The notes are B, C, and D. Then 1-3-4 on the 4th string. The notes are E, F sharp, and G. 1-3-4 again on the 3rd string. The notes are A, B, and C. Then 2-4 are the fingers. On the 2nd string, the notes are D and E. And on the 1st string, 1-2. And the notes are F sharp and G there. Okay, so I'm going to use index middle alternation on this one, a kind of old standard way to play it. And I'm going to start out with a normal sound here. So that was my normal sound color, but maybe on this piece of music I want something a little edgier, a little brighter. So I could try just adjusting there a little bit, maybe. Just a little bit more brightness, clarity perhaps. Or if I want something really crazy, I can go back here toward the bridge and play with a more straight on wrist angle, 90-degree angle, and that should give me a super bright sound. Pretty bright. And then up here we could go much darker, but there's one downside to playing at this 45-degree angle across the string, and that is on the basses we get a really loud scratchy sound if you use nail. So what I tend to do on the bass strings is I actually tilt my wrist a little bit, not quite radically this way, but a little bit, and it gets rid of that scratchy sound for the most part. So I'm trying to get rid of that to create a more beautiful sound. So I'm going to do that here, just a little on these basses. All right, so it gave me a little clearer sound. Now when I got to the trebles, I actually changed my wrist back to this. So those are just a few different exercises. Really what you want to do is to try this, these changes of timbre out in your own practicing until you feel comfortable manipulating sound, and then apply it to whatever exercises you're working on currently for your own technical development. And it could be the ones that I gave you here, these Giuliani studies and G major scale, but it doesn't have to be. You really can apply it to anything. And it's not limited to just scales, arpeggios, and tremolo either. You can really apply it to any type of exercise you're working on. So the takeaway from today is really learning how to manipulate sound, color, or timbre on the guitar. And the best way I think to do that is to think in 3 practical concepts. One is placement along the string. The other is the angle that you go across the string. And lastly is the tilt angle, or the shape of the object that departs from the string. And if you play around with those, you'll be able to really see what it takes to manipulate sound on the guitar and to create a lot of color in your playing and hopefully be a more expressive player. All right, so that's all for this episode of From the Practice Studio. I hope that this enhances your playing at least a little, and just got to work at it a little bit, and day after day it starts to become a more normal part of your technique, and that's what it takes, I think. So until next time, I hope that you practice well, and we'll see you soon. Cheers.